And welcome back to Janky AF. Now here is our 2022 bull market list for trucks, vans, and SUVs. I did a car list. You can check that out now on Janky AF and Janky do Thanky. So the proviso I gave in the last video, or the caveat that I gave in the last video, cars and trucks are generally terrible investments. You should not invest in them if you're trying to play the market. Recently, in the last couple of years, all consumer goods have gone up. Cars have started to go up. They've been starting to be looked at as investments, especially with people who already have a lot of money. Certain models, the Countach, Ford GT, some of these exotic cars are shooting up in value. But also, you know, Audi RS4 and some of these more early enthusiast cars that have started to sort of catch fire and really go up in value. You know, obviously the Toyota Supra is a great example of this. So I wanted to do sort of a janky version of this. These I think will all be below $15,000. I have 7 examples here with a couple little variations, sub-examples. I believe I did 10 for cars. So just some trucks, vans, and SUVs that I think are really cool, and who knows, maybe they will appreciate in value, you know, more so than the average price of anything would. I would not buy that for that purpose. And I'll say, if you're going to try to invest in something of like a classic car, now a lot of people wouldn't call these classics. Now in New York State, anything over 25 years old is technically a classic. I think they're classics. You should do one of two things. You should either buy the rattiest, jankiest version you can find and either try to fix it up, which you will probably not get your money back for, or customize it and make it your own without the intention of ever reselling it. And maybe if you make it really cool and really out there and really unique and you do a really good job, you can get, you know, some to all of your money back if you find the right buyer and they think it's really cool. Or you find the best possible example you can, the best condition, best interior, lowest miles. You buy it at a fair price, and hopefully over time that particular model will sort of become lusted after. There'll become a real market for it, an enthusiast market for it, and then, you know, who knows, things happen. These are all sort of shots in the dark from my end on what could be good. So without talking too much, let's get into it. First on the list is my favorite car of all time. I had to include it on this list. I have owned 2. I sold one, my buddy Evan. The Ford Aerostar. The Ford Aerostar is the greatest car of all time. It's the most versatile, the most aspirational, this 80s spaceship futuristic van that could do anything. Is it a car? Is it a truck? Is it a van? It's built on sort of a truck chassis. You could get it with a manual transmission. You could get it with all-wheel drive. It comes in 2 body length styles, which are actually operating on the same 119-inch wheelbase. They made over 2 million of these. They were all produced in St. Louis. They ran from 86 to 97, as I may have said. They made them 2 years longer than they were planning to make them because, as the legend goes, I have no idea if this is true, the Ford factory and dealerships were bombarded with letters from people saying they didn't want to buy a Windstar. They wanted to keep on selling the Aerostar. There's a great article on Haggerty that actually just came out about how this van is so under the radar because, you know, the Chrysler minivans and then the Chevy Astro. The Chevy Astro is like the 4x4 minivan, and the Chrysler minivan is like the passenger minivan. And the Ford kind of was like a hybrid of those both. You're going to see lots more content if you watch this channel on the Ford Aerostar, so I won't bash you over the head too much with it. But actually, one of these did just sell on Cars and Bids for, I believe, like around $6,000 to $8,000. Doug DeMuro actually talked about how this was one of his favorite 90s cars that he'd sold in the last 3 months or whatever on the channel. He touched on it briefly. Now, I actually almost got Doug DeMuro to review my Aerostar a long time ago. That's another video and a little teaser here. But I may one day have to drive my Aerostar out to California just so he can review it. That being said, the market for Aerostars, you know, you can get a real dilapidated one for under $1,000 still. And then going up from there, you know, top of the line, end of the world is probably around $9,000-$10,000 for the absolutely most pristine ones. So you can get into these very cheap and they're very versatile vehicles just for you to use in your everyday life. Like I said, you can find manual transmissions when out there. I just actually found this one, which is this 86, the first year they made them. Now it is an automatic transmission, only 70,000 miles. This thing was like pristine. It was in Michigan and actually is sold now for $3,500. And this thing is just like immaculate, like the day it came off the lot. Now it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. They made these two-tone paint schemes. You can see the very old school 80s interior. And I actually do think as an investor car, these are going to gain steam. You saw that one sell on Cars and Bids. I think as more and more people discover them, there's a little bit of like literature and journalism coming out on them. And they made so many of them, so they're kind of easy to find. But of course, getting them in good condition is going to be harder and harder. So I actually do think this is quite actually a good investor buy. And this 80 shape is starting to get really hot. I think people they laughed at them first, and now they're going to realize that they're really, really cool vans and really practical, especially with van life taking off. And my hot take on the Aerostar is I actually think the Aerostar is inspirational to the design of the Tesla Cybertruck. Now you can argue with me there, but I think there's actually a really direct connection, and I hope one day Ford will cash in on this sort of retro craze and make an EV Aerostar, but that's another video for another time. So moving on. And DeMiro actually mentioned this, I swear I'm not copying him, but he mentioned the first generation Ford Explorer. I think the first two generation Ford Explorers, first gen was 91 to 94, second gen was 95 to 2001. But I think specifically in a two-door variation. Now I think two-door SUVs in general are going to get hot, and I think everyone loves their Jeep Wranglers, everyone loves their Land Rovers, and that's a little higher in price. Everyone loves their sort of off-roading vehicles. I think the two-door Explorer is just a great looking truck, a really, really cool looking truck. And I think that there's no market for these right now. They're just seen as an old used car. But as the Explorer in general starts to take off, and you see your Jurassic Park ones, but I think the two-door example would make like a great alternative to a Jeep Wrangler. And you can also get them in a manual transmission, which is a large theme. Like classic cars, especially obscure classic cars or cars you didn't think would normally have a manual transmission where they were offered, I think is really, really cool. I believe there's two listed here. Now I actually couldn't even find a first gen one. I'm sure if I searched Marketplace I could find one. There's two second gens here with a manual transmission, and you know, these are just used cars right now, and they're getting older, and they're getting to the point now where they're going to be over 25 years old. You can register them and insure them as classic vehicles, which will save you money because classic vehicle policies are generally much, much cheaper. So if it's your second vehicle, now here's a 99, 138,000 miles, really not that many miles, for $4,400. Now try to find a Jeep Wrangler in that condition. Now you may say it's not quite as capable if you're actually doing serious off-roading. I don't know enough about off-roading to really speculate on that, but I would imagine there's lots of things you can do to lift this and you know, do other sorts of things to make it more off-road capable. I think it's a great looking truck, and I think that it's going to, again, like any other car of this generation, be harder and harder to come by, especially in good condition, especially with manual transmission. So if you see something like this, you clean it up, you make it nice, and in a couple of years on Bring a Trailer, I see this getting more than $4,400, honestly. So first and second generation Ford Explorer two-door, and then if you can find one with a manual transmission, extra bonus points. Okay, moving on. The Infiniti FX45 and FX35, but I want to focus on the FX45 because that was the crazy one. That was the one with the big V8. Now I looked up this a little bit. The engine in the FX45 was a dual overhead cam, 32 valve V8, aluminum alloy block and heads, micro finished camshafts and crankshafts. Now I don't know what micro finished means. I don't know if that actually makes it better, but it sounds impressive. Titanium intake and exhaust valves. That's pretty cool. Continuously variable valve timing control system. When it was developed, it was being referred to as the Bionic Cheetah. When these things came out, I actually remember being in Lithuania at one point on some travels, talking to a guy who was really obsessed with one of these and really wanted one. I just thought they like completely shook up the world. I mean, they were this like super performance SUV that looked amazing. I still think these things look great. I think they're heavily influencing on what Mazda's design looks like these days, ironically enough, not necessarily Nissan. They're sort of bulging and they have this rounded muscular look to them. I think they look really, really great. And the FX35 would still be a good buy too. You're just having the V6, so not quite as much power, but a very, very cool looking older SUV that I feel like has been a little bit forgotten. You see with all these like performance SUVs coming out, BMW, you know, X5M, stuff like that. I think this would be a really cool classic older SUV that you just don't hear people talk about that much anymore. And I feel like they did get like a lot of buzz when they came out. I think they did. I think they were popular, but just a fantastic looking vehicle. And I'm not sure what the exact performance specs are on them. But this one's 13 grand with 100,000 miles on it. So, you know, SUVs are expensive in general. 320 horsepower. Looks like it's in very, very good condition. And I think this would just be a really, really cool, look at that. Look at the you know, rounded lines on that. It's beautiful. The little sort of gaps in where the taillights come in, the little bezels there. Everything just fits really well together. All these rounded lines are really, really beautiful. Let's see if we can get a shot of the interior quick here for you all. That front grille is really iconic. Still a very, very nice interior. And this is a 2008, so not quite classic territory yet, but you know, it's almost 15 years old. Still looks in very good condition. I think they've aged extremely well, and like a fast, powerful SUV that you could have a lot of fun with. I definitely see these things appreciating as time goes on, if you can find a really, really nice, clean example of one. Okay, this is a fun one, and I know I'm doing a lot of SUVs here, but for the truck people, we have the Lincoln Mark LT. Let me see if I can find this. Sorry about that. I was a little out of order. This is Janky. We do a Janky here in Janky AF. Lincoln Mark LT, which was made from 2006 to 2008. Only 3 years. Now this was sort of competing with the Cadillac Escalade EXT, which was like the pickup, the crazy looking pickup version of the Escalade. I think these look a lot nicer personally. It's personal preference. I believe they outsold the EXT at first, and I think the Cadillac eventually took them over because Escalades were just the, you know, the bee's knees for a while. Now obviously this is just a badge job on a Ford F-150, but I think it's really cool that FOMOCO, Ford Lincoln Mercury, did this vehicle at all. I think it's really, really cool. And I've seen a couple of these around locally, and you don't see them that much anymore. Now they still are a decent penny. You know, you have one here with $20,000 for 90,000 miles on it. A lot of them do have high mileage on it, which is cool to me because it means they were actually used. But again, this would be a great used car purchase if you just want something different. Now it is like this crew cab, so it's basically you're getting an SUV with seating for 4 with a bed in the backup. It's a luxury vehicle, obviously. I think it's very beautiful looking. It rides high, you're getting all-wheel drive, you're getting all that. Plus you're getting a bed in the back, so it's super, super practical. But you can still carry 4 people very easily and very comfortably in it. It's very capable, I'm sure. As a 4-wheel drive vehicle, it's a truck. You're getting all the things of a truck, but you're getting this luxury element of it too, and it's a Lincoln. It's got a sunroof. Now, luxury trucks obviously are huge now, but this like sort of predated that a little bit, and I think it's really, really cool that Ford and Lincoln decided to do it. Beautiful seats in there. You know, obviously, it's a gussied up Ford F-150, but I think a really, really cool truck. It's got the, you know, the floor shifter rather than the column shifter. Really cool truck. I think these are really great. And what I was going to say is that I think it's cool that Lincoln made these, considering that they tried it once before and failed. And this goes to the sort of sub item on this, which is the Lincoln Blackwood. Now the Lincoln Blackwood, I had forgotten about this thing, quite honestly. They only made it in 2002. It only came in this shade of black. There's actually quite a few of these for sale. And you know, it's going to be cheaper than your Lincoln Mark LT. It's a little older, but here's a 2002 for 10 grand with just over 100,000 miles on it, 120,000 miles on it. Now you're getting 13 miles per gallon, which is not great. 300 horsepower V8. But I think these things are really cool, and I see these taking off more than the LTs in terms of an actual investor car, or in terms of a cool car that you could, you know, possibly gain value on over time. Again, not quite as nice as interior, being a little older. I actually think these look really, really cool, and I think they look more like a Lincoln than the LT did. I think they stand out a little bit more. Now, obviously, they have this beautiful almost like rounded, almost like PT Cruiser-esque tailgate here with these pinstripes on them. A really, really cool looking car. Lincoln tried this experiment. It obviously didn't work, but I love that they came back later and did it anyways, again with a Mark LT, which was probably, I would imagine, a little cheaper to develop. Really, really cool truck. And again, you're getting basically, you know, if you don't have to fit 12 people in your car, you're getting like a small SUV that has a bed in the back. Really interesting looking. The way the rear of it almost like is curved instead of flat down like most trucks. Really, really cool car. So I think these are forgotten about. I think eventually if you get to find a really, really nice example and find the right buyer, they could appreciate in value. Not that you should ever buy a car hoping to, you know, make money on it realistically, just by having it sit there. So the Lincoln Blackwood. Now, jumping backwards for a second and going back to our SUVs, this is the Lexus RX 300 and RX 330. Now they just kept jumping up a number. The RX 300 went from 98 to 2002. The RX 330 went from 03 to 07. This is sort of one that I thought about not including on this list, but immediately it jumped out at me. I love the RX 330 in particular, and the RX 300 just came a little bit before that, and I include it here because it was sort of the original one. Again, luxury SUVs, this is pretty new for, you know, the year 2000. Luxury SUVs are starting to come up. Now this is probably somewhat of a re-engineered Honda CR-V. And you look at the really old ones, the RX 300, and the interiors are actually not that impressive. And honestly, for how old these cars are, I thought they might be a little bit cheaper. A lot of them do have super high mileage on them. But this two-tone color scheme, much like the Aerostar Lexus was doing, and I thought it was really, really classy. A lot of them, you see the white with the gold underbelly. I thought that was really, really beautiful. And you're getting this, you know, like CR-V, but it's like way, way more luxurious. Now you're getting all-wheel drive, which is very, very nice. Now, what I think, who I think should buy this car is if you're looking at getting like an old, sort of reliable car that's not going to cost a lot of money, the Toyota Camry, like a late model Toyota Camry, is one of the best cars you can buy. But if you go a little bit older and maybe pay a tiny bit more money, you can get an old Lexus RX 300. And you're getting, in addition to, you're getting all-wheel drive, first of all, so that's a bump up over a Camry, and then you're riding a little bit higher. People like to ride a little bit higher. I can't imagine your mileage is that much worse. So I think this is a great purchase for someone who might want to get an old Camry, but why not just like bump it up and make it an SUV? Because as we all know, SUVs rule the world now. It looks great in this dark blue. Now this is $6,000, you know, for a car with 100,000 miles. You take care of it, it'll get you another 100,000. And I thought when the RX 300 and RX 330 came out, they were a really, really big sort of moment for Lexus. I thought they were really great cars. I think they're still, to this day, are a really, really pretty car. And any car of this age, you know, 2002, even though they are still a modern car, they're old enough where they don't have a billion screens in them. They don't have all this sort of technological just overwroughtness to them. I think they're still a great looking car, and you're getting a Lexus, so you're getting a Toyota. I think Lexus in general, I've really, really started to appreciate in the last few years for how good of a bargain they are in terms of luxury and reliability. Now here's this gold color I feel like was iconic, and just a really great side profile. But you know, your door and window lines are still a bit lower than cars are now, and I think it's a really pretty attractive car. And who knows, maybe they will increase in value when people of a certain age sort of start to remember them. Maybe that was their family's first car, the car they grew up with. Obviously there's a ton of them out there. I would try to find like a really low miles clean example, and you know, cars like this just aren't really appreciated, even though at the time I think they were really, really important cars for where the carscape was going, and still to this day are a super practical car that you could have as a second vehicle. It's, you know, most people wouldn't say they're an enthusiast car, but I think the bubble for what enthusiast cars should be widened. In my view, they're all cars, but you know, I'm certainly probably in the minority there. Okay, moving on. The Saturn Vue, first generation Saturn Vue. Now I love Saturn as a brand. I would love to review some more Saturns. I thought the Vue, I believe the Vue is their first crack at doing an SUV. Now Saturn was already a little long in the tooth at this point in their lifespan. First generation ran from 2002 to 2007. The interesting story about these Vues that some people may know is for the V6 versions, the 3.5 liter V6 was actually sourced from Honda, and I believe the transmission was sourced from Honda too. And I've actually heard varying things about the goodness of that transmission, but a Honda engine is hard to go wrong with. Sort of just a cool, unique sharing story. Now I believe in the deal, Honda got some Isuzu GM engines, some diesel engines that they use in their European market. So that was like the trade they did. But the ones I'm actually looking at are the 4-cylinder versions, because those were offered in a manual transmission. You see this beautiful red Saturn Vue. And I still think they're really, especially the rear 3/4, a really distinctive shape, a very pretty car. I still think they look great. I think their profile looks great. And I like the idea of Saturn and all that they stand for making an SUV, because it sort of just steps them into the modern age a little bit more. Beautiful manual transmission, very nice interior. I love two-tone interior, especially sort of like a dark color on top with a lighter color underneath. Nice white gauges here, a nice stick shift that looks in a very like sort of driver-friendly positioning. Quite a nice interior. You have a little bit of that 2000s fake chrome going on, polished aluminum, but other than that, I think a really cool car. I imagine these probably get pretty decent mileage. They only have a 143 horsepower, 2.2 liter 4-cylinder engine. It's not giving me a mileage quote here, unfortunately. You can look that up if you'd like. But I saw one of these when I was in Texas. I saw one of these in this like sort of pale canary yellow color, and it was really, really beautiful. I just think they're great cars, and they're forgotten about. And again, if you can find one in a manual transmission, relatively low mileage, clean interior, maybe you can drive it for a few years and then sell it on something like Cars and Bids or Bring a Trailer. And if you find the right buyer, I think it could be sort of an enthusiast car. I think any of these sort of forgotten about SUVs with manual transmissions are generally sort of like a cool, unique car to own. You can have it, you can have fun with it, and it's a GM, so you know it might not be the most reliable, but also it's probably not going to be super expensive to maintain. So that's always a good thing. They did make a red line version of the 2nd generation Vue, which I didn't really do too much research on, but that would certainly be sort of a cool investor car too, or enthusiast car. And I believe the Saturn Sky and Pontiac Solstice are really starting to take on some steam too, especially the red line version of the Saturn Sky are sort of finally starting to be appreciated. Okay, so I believe this is the last one. We'll save maybe the best for last, or funniest for last anyways. And this is the Hummer H3. Okay, the Hummer H3 was produced from 2005 to 2010. And I saw one of these in person the other day. I put it up on Instagram, and boy, seeing them in person, it's a really, really good looking car. Now the proportions obviously are sort of cartoonish, but in person it looks really, really good. You don't realize quite how small it is. I think it's cool that GM decided to do an H3 as opposed to the H2, like make it like a baby version of it. I actually would 100 times out of 100 have an H3 over an H2. You're going to get, actually the mileage still isn't great on them at all. But you're going to get certainly a little bit better mileage, a little easier to drive. You probably won't get as much, scornful glances from other people on the road. And of course, the calling card for a lot of these cars is that they were offered with a manual transmission. And as soon as I saw this Hummer H3, I had to go online, I had to go look them up, and I had to see whether they had a manual, because I kind of had a sneaking suspicion that they did, because they are this sort of smaller SUV, and a lot of smaller SUVs traditionally were offered with manual transmissions, because the SUV sort of came out of the truck, and for a lot of times trucks had manual transmissions. So now this is definitely at the top of the line price wise. You have one here for $14,600 with only 61,000 miles on it. So again, $14,000 is not a lot of money for an SUV in today's age. Now this is a 2006, so it's getting on a little bit in years. I think it looks great in this red. I believe the one I saw was a black or a dark gray. It looked really, really great, because again, any car with a lot of cladding seems to look better in a darker color where it sort of hides some of the cladding. Great stick shift here. And the cool thing when I posted this, someone commented, which I thought was really cool, was that these came with a inline 5-cylinder engine. I believe they had a V8 option too, but all the manuals came with a 5-cylinder engine, 220 horsepower. And I believe that engine was built as well as perhaps the whole vehicle in Buffalo, New York. Now I have a huge soft spot for Buffalo, New York, so that was kind of a cool little story thing for me. This one's in Greenville, Alabama. But just one of those cars where I feel like these probably will always have some sort of enthusiast market to them. They have the Hummer brand to them, and I'm sure there's like sort of an H3 clique that's like very much into these cars. That being said, I only see these appreciating over time, especially if you have one with a manual transmission, because it is a fairly rare specification. Just that, you know, classic Hummer grille and sort of the meaty hood with the big fenders on it. I really do think it's a great looking truck. I think it's aged very well. And the boxiness of it is totally keeping in with the times. I feel like boxy styling is really coming back again. I don't know how practical it is as a car. Again, your mileage is not great, but it has this sort of like rubberized flooring that you can probably wash out really easily. Again, a great sort of Jeep Wrangler alternative. Some of these other SUVs, Wranglers just have crazy residuals on them. They hold their resale value so well, which is great and all, but I think if you want something a little different, maybe you look at a Hummer H3, especially if you can find one with a manual transmission. So, I like to talk, obviously, and hear the sound of my own voice. I hope I haven't bored you too much. If you've stayed till the end, well, that's amazing, and Janky do thanky. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to our channel. We got tons of new reviews coming out, all sorts of fun stuff, project cars. We got a Buick. You'll see more content on my lovely Ford Aerostar. And thank you for watching. That's my 2022 bull market list for trucks, vans, and SUVs. We'd love it if you'd comment. Tell us what we left off the list. Tell us how crazy and stupid you think these ideas are for investor cars and enthusiast cars. And until next time, Janky do thank you.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.